Joining me now are Washington Post columnist and MSNBC analyst Ezra Klein and Robert Reich, former Labor Secretary in the Clinton administration. He's now professor of public policy at the University of California at Berkeley and the author of Aftershock. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Bob, I, for one, am very happy with where this situation has ended up with the super committee. How do you see it going from here?
Lawrence, I agree with you about the tactical brilliance of the president in terms of pulling this off. My only concern is this. The economy is still obviously awful. It needs a fiscal boost. Whether you call it a stimulus or you call it liverwurst, it's still a fiscal boost that's needed. And the president is not going to get it. The paralysis we've seen so far is going to clearly continue right through Election Day, if not beyond, which means that the expiration of unemployment extensions, that unemployment benefit extension, and also the expiration of the payroll tax cut are going to eat into aggregate demand. There's going to be less and less aggregate demand. It's going to be harder for any kind of a fiscal boost to emerge. I worry that even by the beginning of 2013, if you want to look ahead beyond the election, the economy is still going to be very bad, and there's not going to be any fiscal boost at all. Those cuts are front-loaded to 2013. It's going to be very hard to get anything. I just, again, concerned about jobs in the economy. It's not such a big win.
Let's listen to what John Kerry had to say today, blaming Grover Norquist.
Unfortunately, this thing about the Bush tax cuts and the pledge to Grover Norquist keeps coming up. Grover Norquist has been the 13th member of this committee without being there. I can't tell you how many times we hear about the pledge. Well, all of us took a pledge to uphold the Constitution.
And here's Grover Norquist on 60 Minutes, in effect, taking at least some credit, accepting what John Kerry said.
The Republicans won't raise your taxes. We haven't had a Republican vote for a income tax increase since 1990.
And this was your doing?
I helped. Yeah.
Ezra, how are the Republicans feeling about that pledge to Grover Norquist tonight?
A lot of them aren't feeling so good. And I think one unnoticed part of the super committee negotiations is that Republicans became less willing to compromise than they were a couple months ago. Remember that in the deal between John Boehner and Obama, the deal that was being struck behind closed doors, by the end, John Boehner was willing to go with $800 billion in revenues. In this deal, the highest Republicans ever got was the Toomey plan that had $300 billion in actual new revenue. So they went down from $800 billion to $300 billion. But the thing that worries me, Lawrence, is that I'm not sure that the White House sees the Bush tax cuts the way you do. When I talk to them, they do not seem to want them to expire. They seem completely unwilling to let that happen. They have their own pledge to never raise taxes on anybody making less than $250,000 a year. And if that's going to be the case, if it's going to be between extending most of the Bush tax cuts as Barack Obama's current position is, or extending all of them as the Republicans' position is, and the two end up right there in the middle, I worry we're not going to get fiscal sanity, and we'll have lost one of the only real chances we had to get back a revenue base that could actually support the government going forward.
Bob, I agree with Ezra that the Democrats have gotten really gun-shy about raising taxes, but we've got a lot of time between now and when those taxes automatically go up. And it seems to me that someone should start making the case for what the world was under those Clinton tax rates and just how they would affect across-the-board taxpayers if they go into effect. If you have this tax increase, for example, on the bottom bracket, what is the practical effect of that? What is the real cost of that? People should start doing the analysis of that from the Democratic side so that they can prepare for the possibility of it happening, shouldn't they?
Absolutely, Lawrence. If you look at the upcoming election, the president does have time to make the case to the public that not only should taxes go up on the very wealthy, the small tax increases on everybody else are going to be acceptable, that the biggest issue we face over the long term is the budget deficit, but in the short term, this election is going to be about jobs. I mean, most people really are not into the details of the tactical pros pros and cons of what the super committee did, what the Republicans are doing. Most people don't even know who Grover Norquist is. I mean, most people are really still in the grips of a jobs recession, and they want this election to be about jobs and about doing something about jobs. I think the president has bought himself some time now to really sell even a larger jobs agenda than he already has. And I hope he takes advantage of that time and that opportunity.
Ezra, is the White House talking about any kind of jobs agenda going forward?
Not beyond the American Jobs Act, but I think they are still talking about the American Jobs Act. One thing that was interesting in the press conference today was Obama was very clear. He said, look, Congress has a year, as you mentioned at the beginning, a year to figure out what to do about deficit reduction if they don't want the trigger. What they need to do now is a payroll tax cut and unemployment insurance because they expire at the end of 2011, and also to deal with infrastructure, as he put, to get construction workers back to work. So though I don't know that they'll be expanding their jobs agenda, I think they've been very, very clear going forward that they expect that to be where Congress turns to now, and they intend to force that issue, particularly at the end of the year, because it's going to be very tough for Republicans to argue that they can't raise taxes on the rich, but they can let the payroll tax cut expire for the working class.
Ezra Klein and Robert Reich, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.